Okay. Welcome, everyone. Glad you all showed up. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been working in housekeeping for about a little over 25 years. I worked in Illinois for a little while, in central Illinois at Illinois Wesleyan, and then also about close to 13 years ago, I started working for NC State. And when I first started at NC State, we didn't have any mapping system, and I was working on a response crew. So anyways, I created websites, so I went ahead and made this is before they had GIS, they just had like a campus map on the website. So what I did was I took that information and then I circled it, and then I made our own mapping system for the housekeeping department. So I was able to find the buildings quickly because I had no idea where these buildings were. So I got called into the office, and then they put me on doing FTEs on RKA cleanup. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but anyways, it was a way to track and monitor FTE calculations. So anyways, that's how I kind of got started in this whole realm of fun and ability. And at first it was extremely challenging, but I just want to, let me see if I can, oh great, this thing's not working. I had some technical difficulties before, so let me just turn this back on, and plug this back in, see if this, okay, see if this works now. Okay, it's going to be a butt. So let me see. Okay, just move. Okay. Facility management systems. I think the most important thing here, I mean, this is kind of a definition, but I think the main thing is to improve the quality of life. And I just wanted to show this information because it's. Ooh, boy, that thing worked. Okay. Here. You see the mouse in there anywhere? Okay. I should switch. There we go. Okay. FM Systems provides a whole list of things, and since I've gotten here, we also it also does BIM, but all of these things that the FM Systems do is they don't do any staffing calculations for our facility management. And that's one thing that we've really tried to strive to try to get done at NC State since, well, in the past 12 years for sure. But some of these other conferences, I've talked to a lot of housekeeping directors and facility directors, and they're all saying they need staffing. So I did a study with FM Systems. It was called Housekeeping Module Extensions, and there's a cheaper way to do these calculations on a live system. So when we moved it into when we got FM Systems, it's a company out of Raleigh, and they're here at the conference. When we got them to our university, we went ahead and started putting some of our data into the system, and was able to build the system. But the main thing we needed to get everything done, we had the building names, the space descriptions, room descriptions, area, and some sort of facility management system is available in almost 90% of the larger universities. The thing about the module aspect is that it's actually way cheaper than it would be if you bought your own software, and it's just more or less a way to unify the data source with a transparency of everybody pulling from the same well, and also the authentication that we can actually pull this information, and we can prove that that's the size and that's what the space is being used for. Since we started using FM Systems, we were able to take housekeeping space uses, and what we did, we took those, we took the architectural data and we converted it into just generic terms that we can use for cleaning purposes. So what we did was we went ahead and we labeled it, and then we have cleanable square feet in some of the buildings. This is just some of the slides from some of the stuff that we can actually do. We can take the zones, and we can know exactly how many square feet of offices or classrooms or labs in any of the 20 zones that we have. Not to mention, we also have floor surface data in there too as well, so we can tell you how much VCT, carpet, terrazzo, or any other type of surface is in any particular area, region, or floors. So I'm going to move quickly because I got a lot of slides. I probably put a lot on here. Okay, the main things you need for FT module extensions are right here on the screen. And I'll go into detail on every single one of those. The housekeeping space use obviously was the first, but when we took the housekeeping space use, we took this information and we took all of the things that we cleaned and we put a 1 next to it. So when we did our gross square feet, we just multiply the gross square feet times 1 to get your, to get the cleanable square feet. And if it was 0, obviously it didn't count those areas. So it was a simple way to actually get it. And the acronyms that we use for the housekeeping space uses actually were tagged with those 1s and 0s. Okay. The next thing is the cleaning matrix terms. And we have 2 different types we have to deal with. We have the daily cleaning, which are mainly your restrooms and corridors and the different areas. And then we have your non-daily cleaning. In our case, we only clean offices once a month. That might be a once a week thing. Or like, for instance, stairwells. We clean those twice a month. So we can actually dial in the different types of frequencies, and that takes a toll on your daily FTE values. So when you're doing your totals. So as you see, like you have the different types of offices. As far as conference rooms, we have study rooms and meeting rooms. So those all kind of fall into the same kind of cleaning category, and we group those together. Cleaning time studies. Okay, this is the best way to prove. This is your evidence to say that hey, it takes this long to clean these areas. Now, other companies have like I know ISSA has a a directory of different types of spaces. And what that does is it gives you a source to pull out maybe your type of information you have at your university. But who knows your university or your institution better than you? So we at NC State, we went ahead and we took a lot of studies. We would have zone managers and some of the housekeepers, and we had some of the admin staff actually go out there with stopwatches and time the different areas. Now that can be extremely time consuming, not to mention that sometimes, when you're under pressure, you got to get it done quickly. Some of the zone managers were guesstimating the estimates, and you kind of get a suspicious feeling when the same person can be in 3 different buildings on the same day at the same time. So, and that did happen a couple times, or you have duplicate times, of the same space. So we wanted to make sure that we could do it in a more honest way. So what we did was we submitted a design to a developer to come up with a cleaning time study app. And what it does is when you pick up your phone, the housekeeper would be signed in with their Unity identification, so we know who they were. They go up to the sign, they take a picture of the sign, and that turns it into an OCR text. Well, that OCR text with the GIS location actually lets us know which building they're in. It gives a timestamp of the time and date. Plus, we have the Unity identification of the housekeeper, and then we have, it goes to a cloud where it links in with the system that can identify what that space is used for and the square feet of that space. So then we can pull this information together to actually use it in our data collection process where we're trying to, get the calculations. Let's see, oops, went too far. Okay, well, no, I didn't. Okay, this is the, let me see if I can see that mouse, because I got to get this mouse all the way down to this little button down here. Okay, this is the housekeeping space, the FTE tool. Let's see. Okay, and what we do is we have a side monitor with numbers of the different types of spaces. And this way we don't have to type all the information in, we just call it up. So we get the information from the cloud, we just go ahead and dial it up, and then it drops it in there. So what we do with this information, we take it and we run it into different scenarios. So what we do is we average this stuff out, and then it goes into the different scenarios, and it plays a frequency on each one of these calls. Let's see if I can advance to the next. Okay, I have to do this manually. Okay. All right, so what we try to do is we try to get an average cleaning time. So this is what we do for a daily place. We have a routine. We do 4 routines a week, and we do 1 detail a week. So we multiply the 4 routine days by the routine cleaning time, and then we add the detail time, and we average it out. And we use decimal minutes because it calculates a little bit easier, but we can convert it back if we need to. And this is also recommended in the APA booklet, and they have guidelines to be able to provide that too as well. Okay, then we have our, this is how we get our matrix groups. So we take 3, we just use 3 different time studies. I mean, if you had a larger system, you could probably average more. But we just want to get an average. So we take a high, medium, and low of cleaning times or square feet, and we just and then we average to come up with an equal cleaning time of, for the area. And then what we do is we take that information when we have the average. We take the square feet value and then we divide it. We divide the cleaning time by the square feet to come up with our FTE value, or average cleaning time, or FTE per square foot. Excuse me. Okay. Oops. Here I'm looking. Okay, raw FTEs. Okay, this is a basic way we do raw FTEs. We only do 7 hours, and that's what APA recommends. They have, you know, a half hour for your 2 15-minute breaks, plus they give them another half hour for like setup and tear down and morning meetings and clock out time. So we, you know, so that way it runs kind of fair. So what the FTE, raw FTE is a percentage of the day. It correlates to, you know, when you look at this, it just breaks it down when you multiply it times 100, and you got 3.14% of that particular day. So this kind of gives a breakdown of how it works. If you look up there in the left corner, there's a cleaning time and then the times cleaned per year. So if you look at 260, there's 260 working days official in the APA guidelines. And then there's, you know, so 130 would be half of that. But you see how the value just kind of is separated on the percentage of the day, how it just kind of divides in half. And that's a simple process of how the raw FT value is actually equated. Okay, the annual cleaning frequency multiple. Okay, what we do is we take 1 and we divide it by the 260. So we come up with this, this decimal right here. And when you take the times per year, you multiply it by the annual frequency multiple. So the higher the multiple, you'll see how it kind of maths out there, but the 260 equals 1. So that means it's done on a daily basis. So you take your daily cleaning time and you multiply it times 1. So if you clean it half of that, you know, it would if you took 130, it would be, you know, 0.5.
Based on a 5-day work week?
Yeah, based on a 5-day work week. That's correct, sir. Yeah. And, you know, if you had more of a week, you could probably change that 260. You could basically take 1 and divide it by maybe, 275 or whatever that number would be. And you would come up with a different annual frequency multiple. That's a very good question. Yeah, so that's the math part of that. Okay, then we have the FTE allowance. The FTE allowance is kind of like your workers, you're absent from work. Generally speaking, and you know my experience, it's usually about just around 3 employees per 100 people that, you know, that it brings it down. So if you say you have 100 FTEs to work with, truthfully, you really only got probably about 97. And one thing that I work with the HR department, and what we were able to do was we take the employee identification numbers and we were able to segregate them to the different zones. So we could actually measure the impact of absentee, people missing from work in any of the particular zones. So what that does is kind of gives us a glimpse about, you know, how we need to staff those people, how do we need to distribute the temporary workers, and also kind of give us a time period, because we can actually relate the dates of some of those incidents and stuff. So it's the information is getting a little bit better. It's still early in the program. They save the way they do it, so you know we can pull that information. Now I know for a fact that, you know, that people take the sick time and the annual time, but over the past 10 years since the last APA book was written, they didn't really have FMLA back then. So that's a new factor, and that's actually causes people to be off for a longer period of time. So that needs to be factored in as well to be able to calculate the FTEs, and that might turn that 3 persons per 100, you know, maybe to 6 or 7. So you can really see the impact of, you know, how that affects the whole output. Okay, extending the raw FTEs to equate FTEs. Okay, well I can break this down for you if you want, but if you look at it, you'll see that the you have your average, the FTE allowance multiple is right here, and you multiply that times the raw FTE, and you get this amounts the FTE add-on. So then you take the raw FTE and then you add the FTE allowance, and equals the daily FTE. So, and then on the non-daily, it's similar, it's done similar, but you also have to factor in the frequency multiple, because the multiple up here is automatically 1. The frequency multiple down here is these numbers right here that correlate to the times of the year that you visit that place. And also I want to add that if you're cleaning a place twice a day, that 260 would be 520. You know, like say, and you could equate, actually, if you have a porter that cleans, you know, comes in the restrooms later, you could actually add that into the value and then add it on top of the regular FTE. So there's a lot of ways you could do that. If you wanted to get real picky about it, you know, you could, you know, do it on a daily basis. But for simplicity purposes, I think we just go with this. Okay, all right. Maybe I need to hit it again. There we go. Oh, okay. All right, here's one of those videos. This is the FTE calculator. Now, I have 7 scenarios of this thing. Let's see if I can balance this correctly. Okay, and what, you know, this was Wolf Village in NC State, and if you look at that, it just tells you what the FTE value is for any of those buildings. And in a second here, it's going to go ahead and check the routines in detail. So each client or each zone manager, well, I wouldn't say zone manager, but your directors in your department or assistant directors have the capability to actually, you know, run scenarios and see what the impact would be if you changed your service agreement as far as the frequencies of cleaning and performing details. And this works just the same way on your non-daily services too, or on housekeeping space uses. So kind of get an idea of that. Let's see. All right. Advantage of the FTE module extensions. Okay, it operates on it would operate almost on every facility management system with a few adaptations, adaptable for FM vendor products. I think the main thing here is that we want to make the guidelines uniform. We want to have unified guidelines so that when people are, you know, doing these calculations, everybody's kind of starting on the same plate. So that way, if you're trying to compare apples to apples at another university, you can see that, okay, what are they doing different that we're not doing because their numbers seem to be better. You know, so I mean, you could look at the data. If you're getting the solid data that you have organically at your institution, it's a good way to see, you know, where you're, you know, which is more sustainable, which is more productive. What are you doing different that's making you get the work done in less time? So we can take those different aspects and we can move into, you know, a better way of performing the duties that we have to do. Okay, the housekeeping facility management module survey report. Okay, I don't know if did anyone see this on the CFTA website? Okay. Initially, I wrote the white paper. I did some research, you know, about a lot of institutions that were closing down, you know, housekeeping departments, and bringing in outside contractors, and you know, we have some contractors on our campus. And sometimes they can be managed really well, but unfortunately there's a lot of turnover. So when you train somebody to do something, you know, they could leave, or, you know, you don't have that. You kind of lose. There's a gap in some services. Having an in-house trained unit gives you more resources. We have at NC State we have close to 300 housekeepers. We manage about 250 buildings, and we have all this equipment, so if an emergency situation happens, we can respond very quickly because we have these emergency setups everywhere. And the contractors, they've got to rely for outside sources. We'll help them, you know, we'll assist them when we need to. But, you know, if all you have is contractors, a lot of times they're outsourcing their emergency help, which can be problematic, especially in a disaster situation. So, but anyway, oh, I'm sorry, yes, sir.
You were talking about outsources, insource, and you were talking about turnover in the outsource. You don't have the same turnover on the insource one?
Not if they have benefits. If they have benefits and they have good pay, they usually stick around for a while. I mean, in our experience at NC State, we try to retain employees. In fact, it's more difficult for us to get rid of employees that are not doing a good job, you know.
Yeah, and how we deal with it, just with our outsourced one, is we require them to pay higher wages than union.
Oh, well, that's good. That's excellent. that's really good. Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, if you have to outsource, I mean, if you can take care of the people that you're working with, that's a very good, I'm not going to complain about that, because there are people. The main thing I was kind of pointing out is that in most cases, that's not what happens, unfortunately. Okay, the first question was kind of like, does your institution have a full-time employee calculation system? And I'll say one thing. When I when I sent this out, I sent it out to 600 people. Okay, I sent an email out to 600 people, and APA sent it out to a lot of people, and the CFTA sent it out to a lot of people. So I don't know exactly how many people this was actually sent out to, but I tried multiple attempts to send out the thing for about a month. And we did get a good response, I thought, for the 131. But this kind of shows you that just a tad less than half don't have really a way to calculate their staffing, which is kind of scary, because when the budget office comes to them and they say, hey, we want to see your numbers, and you're going like, ugh, okay, well, let me show you what we have. And a lot of times it's insufficient, and then you're moving on to different ways to actually express that. So I went on to ask the people what type of system. And 50 of the 74 yes responders, they responded this way. And they had the consultant services. I wasn't surprised at that. The software, I was kind of impressed on that. And then the online system is something that I really wanted to concentrate on, because I thought that was something that I wanted to get into, because I've done a lot of research on it and I haven't found anything. So we started going on that. So then I asked, what is the name of the calculation system? And only 31 of those replied, and and 17 of them were software. So I just took it one step farther. I went ahead and said verified FTE calculation systems, because I wanted to know if they were actually capable of taking some type of metric for cleaning times and frequencies with the square feet. And that's all I asked. That's all the three priorities that I had. Well, we had 8 out of all those, out of the original 50 that would actually have something that would calculate the FTEs. And I was really disappointed. I really wanted an online system. But that was from the people that actually responded to the survey. I have some of the names on the white paper if you get a chance to read it. Okay, why institutions don't have an FTE calculating system? Well, most of them want a system that works and it's easy to maintain. And by taking those metrics, that I was talking about earlier with the frequency multiple, using it with the frequency of services, plus also taking those the absentee, the FTE allowance, and putting that into the equation, along with the cleaning times and the information that we get from the architectural data, for the square feet. I mean, putting all those things together is a good way to, you could have a database that breaks it down. In fact, I can do it on a spreadsheet, break down the FTE value of each of those spaces. Now, your spaces that get cleaned maybe once a month are going to be a lot less, obviously, because you're taking a fraction, you're fractionizing the FTE data. But you want to get a daily average, and that's what most people want to look at. Okay, other reasons why the institutions do not have FTE systems, okay? Funding's a big problem. And, that's why, I think that moving in the direction of an FTE module extension actually minimize cost. I mean, you're not bringing in a whole nother software program. You're not siloing it out to other, different types of software. You're basically taking the information that we presently have on the facility management systems, and you're just extending it to other parameters. We did the same thing with with our housekeeping space uses. We did the same thing with our floor surfaces. We have a floor maintenance module that we have, and we've been doing the same thing with that. So while we're working on it, that's still funding. We're still working on the funding for that. And so putting this system together, I really think is actually a very economical way to perform these calculations. Okay. I mean, this is no surprise to me. Less than 5% said it wasn't really that relevant on workloading data. If anybody here doesn't think, you know, it's not relevant, I don't know. Maybe you should try doing some other kind of occupation, because in any kind of job, you want to have have a good production staff. Okay, budget office inquiries. Okay, you know, I wanted to know if they could actually explain it. It's one thing to have the data, but be able to actually show it. And one thing about an FM management system is that you could show them where you got the data. You can show them your cleaning time studies. You could break it down into every segment. You could show them the frequencies and how you calculate everything out. It can be broken down and graphically displayed. And that's where I think vendors could actually get involved with it, because they could take a look at it and they can say, we can make a cool dashboard for that. We can make a great graphic display of this particular data. You have all the data spots there. You have your different types of space uses. You have your different types of frequencies. You have your different types of your FTE allowance, where you're having your absentee. So you have all this data, but there's no place for us to display this data other than in spreadsheets and our own charts. So having it on an FM systems, it would be live data, and you wouldn't have to keep updating, because as soon as you get it done with a consultant, even if you have your own software, a lot of times the software doesn't integrate into your facility management systems. You got to export the report in Excel and then import it into your program, whatever that program might be, in order to be current with your information. And you would have to do that on a continuous basis to stay current. Like I said, the cleaning time studies could be done, you know, periodically, just kind of like a maintenance of your data, just so you're checking up on your processes. And like I said, it has a timestamp, so you have it all dated there. Okay, budget office inquiries. Okay, you know, if you want to verify, you know, the processes and documentation, that's the cleaning time studies and all the other stuff. And then this is no surprise. It's pretty much asking the same question. One's in the present tense and one's in the future tense. But you really want to be able to predict your staffing. I mean, we've done that several times on different projects at NC State. We take the floor plans and we convert everything to housekeeping space uses and the frequencies that we're going to clean those areas of square footage based on the other buildings. Like, for instance, we have a new engineering building. We took that information, we put it in there, and so we can calculate approximately how many housekeepers we'll need. You know, you really don't know until you actually move them in the building, but you got a good idea of how many people you should maybe hire for starting staff. Okay, types of FTE calculation systems preferred. Integrated web-based system, I mean, it was very popular. And I might be a little biased, but I think they're right. I think the main thing is that if you can pull it up on a website, if you can, you have your protections. You know, you don't want to give it out to anybody. But also too, if you have a client that's, you know, questioning your judgment, questioning the way you do things, I mean, you can give them temporary access on maybe even doing some scenarios as far as the frequencies. So you have a lot of options, and I think you can move it into different types of displays, and you can do a report, you can do a presentation on it, and you can talk to your senior leaders to find out which is the best decision for your department. Okay, how likely would your institution be willing to purchase it for around $10,000? And I'm saying $10,000 is a ballpark figure because at first it's probably going to cost more than that. But I think the cost would drop dramatically if more people bought into it. And you can see that almost 60%, I would say, at least half, 50%, sorry, would possibly buy it or very likely buy it. And I think more people would probably hop on board if it was more available and they saw some of the displays that some of the vendors might actually put into a product like this. It is extremely valuable for the department. I'll be next year in 2020. This will be in the APA guidelines book. There'll be a little bit of explanation about what's coming around the corner in CAFM systems as far as FTE calculations in that environment. Also in that chapter, I have a thing on team cleaning. And I didn't go into it in this, but basically what it is team cleaning would be, you would do a metric of assigned cleaning, and then you would take those percentages, and then you would have them do the same time, or you'd have them go ahead and clean those areas, and then you would break it down in those percentages that I did before. You would break it down those percentages so you would be able to allocate those FTEs for those particular space based on team cleaning. So you could be able to see that kind of data happen. So, let's make it happen. If there's anything you can do, we would love to be able to create a prototype, develop a test, and promote and distribute, at least a beta form. And if you want to help, I highly encourage you to spread the word, because I've been doing presentations for the past 3 years trying to get the word out on this, and I'm very passionate about it. But I want to hear what other people have in mind or different ideas, and I want to be able to promote this. So if you got any questions, or if you got any thoughts, I would love to hear them.
I actually have two.
Okay.
The first one is back when you were using the app to get an estimate of the time cleaning the space. Now, I'm just curious, did you take a picture of the suite, or did you take a picture of the office to get the space?
You take a picture of the sign, and it turns it into kind of like when they scan license plates, they see the number, or they take a picture of that, and then it turns it into a text form,
Right.
and then they can check data. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, but are you doing the picture of the suite where you include all the offices or individual offices?
Well, we're doing it as a time study, so it's not like we're going to every single room and we're clocking every single room. We just say that, hey, we need some office spaces in this particular building, and maybe the zone manager might say, just get 211 and 214 and 217. They could actually assign those areas and say, okay, we need times on those areas. So then the housekeeper goes in there to look at the list, and they just go ahead and it's already logged in with their Unity identification. So they just go in there, they take a picture of it. I'd like to say this is developed, but it's not. And I've talked to a few vendors here, so they may try to make it and stuff, but pardon me?
The other question is, have you thought of using this to get an estimate of how much staff you will need?
Exactly. Yes.
Meaning that, okay, we have one building that is 3,000 square feet, and to clean that one building, we have 3 people. That takes just close to 4 full days.
Mm-hmm.
So we only know they need to work for 4 days out of 5 for the week,
Mm-hmm.
or shortened days or whatever. We're pulling a building online that's 3,500. Is it good to assume that you could use, well, it takes 3 people for this 3,000 building, 4 days to clean it, so maybe 4 people for this building that's coming online? Is that something you're talking about?
Well, no, I'm not sure I understand the question, but if
You get the estimate of time to clean square footage.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a building with total square
Right.
footage, and you can get a total estimate of time to do that
Mm-hmm.
with the number of people.
Mm-hmm.
And you're putting up a new building that's roughly the same amount of square footage.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to say, well, since this building had that many, we can use that many?
Not necessarily, because every building's just a little bit different. A lot of these studies are regional specific, where you wouldn't take a housing building and try to compare it to a vet school, or you wouldn't take an academic building. But
If you take an academic and compare it to a similar academic with the
it just depends on how much common space it has. It might have a larger lobby. It might have it might have like some research labs, or it might have an area that has a lot of classrooms versus like mostly office spaces, or more small lab offices kind of thing. So it just depends on how heavily the rooms get used. And in fact, you would want to take a really close look at how busy each building's going to be. And it's not going to be identical. And if they're identical buildings, like we have like one, they call it the Tri-Towers, and every building is identical. So you could pretty much take, one building's information, and if it's exactly the square foot, or, has the same, parameters as the other building, we can use that data in both buildings in that kind of case, unless one building's used for something completely different. Depends also, like I said, like how you use the building, too. So it's an honest question, and you're right. I mean, if it's identical, yes.
put your inputs into your model, right? You have the information, list the building, and list all the cleanable services you have to do, the frequencies you have to do, and your spreadsheet will give you the answer.
Yeah, it would, but I mean, you're trying to do it on a large scale. We got 250 buildings. It's kind of tough to do, and you have to do a little bit of individual studies. Yes, sir.
So, what was the name of the cleaning app that you guys developed or that you used?
Actually, the one we're using, it's just a spreadsheet we created on, it's homegrown. Yeah, and I wish I had a way to integrate it into an FM system, but I really don't have that capability. I mean, I've taken SQL and macro classes. I mean, I'm good at Excel, but the other stuff is just a little outside of my playing field, and even though I've tried.
And then, did you guys put up the signs, or were they pre-existing signs next to all the rooms? And were those also used for other things? Did you say you scan it? So is there a QR code on every?
That's something that we haven't developed yet. We have the design, and I did submit it to a developer, and I got a quote. Actually, I did several. I got several quotes from different vendors, and the cheapest one I was able to get it for was $8,000. I talked to somebody here at the conference. They have an idea around $4,000. They may be able to do it, but still, it's raising money. I mean, trying to get. I work in a state institution, so. Trying to get money for a lot of projects, especially housekeeping, sometimes it's not the easiest thing to do. We're having a lot of difficulties lately.
So again, I guess, what did they actually scan? When you said they got ready to clean the room, they would scan it. That's how you would determine the time, when they started. What did they actually scan? Did they...
Oh, okay. They scan the door sign. It has the number. Yeah, it has the number, and then that turns into OCR, and it automatically knows which building they're in based on the polylines of the GIS information, longitude and latitude.
Gotcha. So the existing signs you didn't develop or add extra?
No. I try to keep it as simple as possible because we just wanted to make sure that all they got to do basically take a picture, press go, and then press stop when they're done, and then just classify it a routine or detail cleaning. And the data's uploaded to a cloud, so we don't. I mean, that's all they have to do, because the housekeepers are. I mean, I love them. They do a wonderful job, but as far as keeping data records, most of the time it's not as accurate as we'd like it to have it. There's always some missing cells, and we're trying to figure out what exactly happened. So. Is there any more questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have a question? Oh, okay. All right.
I do have one.
Okay, sure, please. I'm happy.
You're talking about the FTE allowance for the absences, where you had 3 for every 150 people.
Well, 100 people, actually.
100 people, okay. When you were actually doing your actual data collection, how did you get the data for the people being absent? Was that in your timekeeping system? Yes,
actually, that's a good question. We can pull it from our, it's kind of like PeopleSoft. We can pull it from there, and there's some tweaks. I had the HR department. I said, save what you did, because I want it next year. And they were able to save it into, save the processes and the forms and the way they filled it out. So, next year when we pull the information up, hopefully we'll have some sort of system we'll be able to plug all the data into. Now, I could actually, segregate all the information and do it in spreadsheets, but it's a lot of math, and it's a lot of spreadsheets. I have, in some cases, I've done some of these models where I've had like 6 or 7 spreadsheets opened at the same time, and they all link in, and it all works, but it's very unstable, and I want to be able to put it into, something a little bit more sophisticated, but a little bit more stable and accessible too, because you'd be able to access it on your cell phone. I mean, it'd be great to be able to know this information for staffing on your cell phone, and I think that can happen. I'm confident it can. It's just getting the funding and getting the people behind it. But this is very valuable. I mean, a lot of institutions need this. I mean, I have had, since I've been doing presentations at several app, and I've never had anybody say, "Oh, that's ridiculous." Everybody I've talked to, I've never had anybody negative about this whole thing. So, I think it.
Have you thought of going outside the educational field?
Yes, and that's an excellent question too. I have, and I need to. You're right, and I have. When I presented at FM Systems last year, somebody brought up the same comment. In fact, they mentioned something about hospitals and hospitality, and I was thinking, yes, that's definitely a big plus, and I'm all in on that too as well.
Not even hospitals and hospitalities, but possibly even,
The corporations.
A&M uses SSC
Mhm.
for all of their facilities maintenance.
mhm.
So they take care of our cleaning.
Mhm.
So have you thought of like approaching SSC?
You mean like contractors and stuff?
Well, companies that deal just in
Cleaning, right? Sure.
Whether it's this office complex, or this university, or this hospital,
Mhm.
and not just directly with the owners.
I think everybody can use it. Yeah, and that's a good point. Yeah, I need to probably send more stuff out to that. That's a good idea. Thank you.
Two
Yes.
questions. How'd you build into your model on your FTE counts for emergencies? Because you know they happen.
Oh, yeah.
You know they happen, but I didn't see it in the math.
Right.
how you accounted for it.
Well, I mean, that's a good point. And I mean, it would probably have to be done on a separate, scenario situation where you would just say, okay, we calculated this many hours to respond to like a hurricane, for instance, where we had to clean up a lot of water. A lot of times that's usually outside the scope. They have emergency funds. They have emergency funding money for incidents like that, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with staffing because all hands on deck when that happens, especially like during snowstorms or something like that. Not that we have a lot in Raleigh, but occasionally we do have one or two a year maybe.
And the other one, how do you handle summer conferences where you have, I'm assuming you have summer conferences?
Yes.
Quick turnovers, is that outsourced or is that built in the model somehow?
A lot of times that's done with the housing and residential. We have a different entity that actually takes over during those periods of time, but we can build a model for them as well. So we hire a lot of temps sometimes during those processes. Like in the summertime when we're trying to turn over all the dorms, I mean, we don't have enough staff to be able to clean all those rooms and, extract carpets and refinish floors. We have to bring in outside contractors. And we are tracking that information. We primarily track it it's a floor maintenance tool that we built, which is actually done on Google Forms. They just put the information in and it goes to an online database, but it's not integrated in with the FM systems. It's a total separate entity. But it does have an export where it could go into one, and I've got it all ready. It's just ready to go, but I just don't have the back support yet and the financial support on that yet. So,
15.
all right,
Thanks, man.
yeah, all right. Well, thank you.